This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good. All right. So we are starting now with Breishit. I feel bad. I knocked out the other people to be able to start recording. But hopefully they'll come back on. There we go. Oh, Elizabeth. Okay, good. Oh, okay. So first of all, I want to dedicate our learning Le'ilui Nishmas to help elevate the souls of those who were murdered. There's no other word for it. And as a zechut, as a merit for those who are presently being held captive to be safely released, and for a healing for all those who have been injured, and that the heavenly scales should tilt and we should come out of this with Geula Shalema, with absolute Geula. Shalom, shalom, Aaron, shalom, Jenny. Okay, with that having been said, we have Breishit, which to me is very, very encouraging. Breishit is a new start. And good. Good. So Breishit is always, as always, is a new start. And unfortunately, it took such a tragic situation, but there is tremendous, tremendous unity now amongst the Jews in Israel, and I'd say the Jews all around the world. And unfortunately, it often takes external enemies for us to recognize that we've got, and we have to stick together with our differences and with all that goes on to recognize that we are one.
We're not doing very well.
I'm sorry?
I don't think we're doing very well.
I think this has helped turn it around. Yeah, but we certainly have been struggling and we're struggling. Good morning, Judy. Boker Tov Miri. Okay, so I had said that we are dedicating the zechut of our learning for in the Le'ilei Nishmat, those who are no longer with us, for a refuah, for a Yeshua, for those who are wounded, captured, and we should all be able to have besorot tovot, some good news. And as I said, though, there has been a tremendous amount of unity going on in Israel now, and may it continue. May Hashem send bracha. That's all we could hope for. Okay, so Bereshit bara Elokim, eight hashamayim ve'eit haaretz. A lot is said about this pasuk. One of the projects that I decided to try to do this year was, there's a beautiful Parush on the Chumash, a commentator on the Chumash by the name of the Or HaChaim, known as the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the Holy Or HaChaim. It's very, very, very lengthy. And especially on Breishit, it's tens and tens of pages on just Breishit. So I've always wanted to learn it, and I always never can do it within the week preparing for Breishit, and then I fall off the bandwagon, and it never happens. So this year I started 2.5 weeks ago doing the Or HaChaim on Breishit. So now I'm almost finished with Or HaChaim on the first Parsha. I think once I have that under my belt, and each Parsha, I'll be able to keep up with it. So he has some incredible insights and views that he offers. But the first pasuk is Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Now, often mistranslated as, well, Rashi says mistranslated as, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Now, what's the problem with that explanation? To say, in the beginning God created heaven and earth? Well, as we work through our 7 days, that's not the order, right? Shamayim and Aretz, right? That was not in the beginning, right? So Rashi, so the English translates it according to Rashi, which is in the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth, right? Which actually is fascinating. So in the beginning of God's creating heavens and earth, this was the state that it was in. And then God did this and this and this. So in other words, we're not, according to this, we're not starting with the very beginning of this planet. We're starting with this iteration, which is one of there are many different approaches to, we started the year 5,784, right? 5,784 years. Science tells us that the world is billions, between 14 and 16 billion years old. So how do we Torah believing, yet not science denying individuals, how do we make that, how do we understand that? So there are a number of different approaches, and I'll share some with you. And for me personally, I don't need to know which one is right. I just need to have options, right? As long as I've got options, I'm perfectly fine waiting until after 120 years and finding out exactly which one is right. A story that I love to tell, because I think it's a very important story, especially in light of what's going on today and this past week in Israel, is that a rabbi was approached post-Holocaust, and someone said to him, "Rabbi, you went through the Holocaust." "Yes, I did." "And you're a rabbi?" "Yes, I'm a rabbi." "You must have questions." "Oh, I've got questions. I've got more questions than you can imagine." "So, Rabbi, how do you deal with that?" And his response was, "I've got the questions, and I know God has answers. But my concern is, if I'm going to ask these questions and demand answers too stridently, God's going to say, come here, I'll give you the answers. So I'm willing to wait a little bit, and I'm willing to live with the questions until the time comes, then I'll get the answers." And I like to tell this story because I think it's a very important story, because we have to recognize that if we're dealing with a God, then we're not going to understand. That's just a given. If we're talking about the one that created everything, every atom, every cell in our body, in this incredible machinery that just that reproduces it, I mean, it's just crazy, then we are not going to understand everything. That is just a given. My brother, Alav Shalom, blessed memory, years ago told me a story that there was a call-in show in Baltimore where he lived, about, if you were God, what would you do? What would you change? No more war, no more illness, no more hunger, no more poverty. And then someone said, well, if I were God, then I would know everything that God knows. And God knows everything, and for whatever reason, unbeknownst to us, unfathomable to us, he has the world going the way it's going. So obviously, if I were God, I would do exactly what God is doing, and I wouldn't change a thing. But we are left scratching our heads, and that is fair. And that is fair, because again, if we believe in a God, then we have to believe that we're not going to understand everything that God is doing. So,
Rabbi?
yes.
So in the Holy Day Machzor, in the commentary, when we get to Mekonei HaKol, they point out what you were saying about in the beginning of creating, that also Hashem possibly is continuously recreating or
Yes,
re-extending that creation
yes,
all the time, or maybe
yes,
since time is not the
yes.
same construct for him.
Actually, we say that in our daily prayers, Mechadesh b'chol yom tamid, that God renews every moment, Maaseh Breishit, the act of creation. And the idea being that if there is a creation, if you hire somebody to build a bookcase for you, and the guy comes and builds a bookcase, and he puts it up, puts it together, and then he writes, we hire someone to this table, and he comes, sets it up, and he's standing here like this. We say, thank you very much. He says, you're very welcome. Thank you very much. You're very welcome. Are you going to go anywhere? No, I'm staying right here. Why are you staying right here? Because I got to hold the table up, right? Obviously, this is not the guy you want to hire to build your table, right? But because he is creating what's called yesh meyesh. He's creating something from something. And therefore, it has the ability to continue to exist independent of that artisan's input. Hashem, we say, created the world yesh me'ayin, something from nothingness. And if that sounds like science fiction, so if we have an ever-expanding universe, where is it expanding into? Into nothingness, whatever it is. We can't even fathom what that means. But that's science. That's not right. So Hashem created yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, and therefore it needs this constant infusion in order to continue to exist. The Balatanya, according to the Mekubalim, the Kabbalists, they actually say that it's really not yesh me'ayin, it's ayin me'yesh. It's not something from nothing. It's nothing from something. What does that mean? Because our understanding is that initially, what was the world? Pure godliness. But in order to create this world, what did God need to do? He needed to make what's called a halal. He needed to make this area that we exist in where he removed, pushed out his pure godliness so that there would not be this overwhelming sense of God's presence. If there was this overwhelming sense of God's presence, we would not have our free will. We would become robots. We would become like malachim, angels. So God actually created ayin miyesh. Nothing from something. The greatest degree of something is God's presence, and he created this void, this world that we are in, where God's presence is not overwhelmingly felt, right? But coming back over here, so there are many different ways. One way of looking at it, I'm talking about the age of the universe. One way of looking at it is that the first, well, on day, how do we measure time? Sunrise, sunset. When was that set up? Fourth day. So clearly the way of measuring time until that was not the way we are measuring time. So there are those that posit that the first 6 days of creation were not days as we know it. And it was the introduction of humankind on day 6. Then from that point, that's where we move forward into our numbering system. And there is a Professor Schroeder, right? Gerald Schroeder, an MIT professor of physics, right? Who has this whole book, Genesis and the Big Bang, where he goes through that. I don't understand it. So I'm not going to do it justice. But with Einstein's relativity of time, it all depends where you're measuring from, right? Where you're measuring from. And that's how time is, right? This is Einstein. That's how time is very different. And he says once, there's a whole thing over there.
High speeds bend time.
I'm sorry?
High speeds
Bends
time.
Bends time.
And therefore, when everything's very fast, time goes much faster, but you don't notice it.
Right. So, I mean, for example, if I'm sending out a little beep, right? Right over here, you hear beep, 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 beep. But as that is traveling over tremendous differences of time, someone over there is going to hear beep, and then a year later, beep, and then a year later, beep. So if we're measuring beeps, 10 beeps here is 10 seconds. 10 beeps there is 1,000 years, right? So it all depends. Where is the clock, right? Okay. Now there also is, and we'll come back to humankind in a second. There is one of the classic commentators on the Mishnah is the Tiferes Yisroel. And when fossils were being discovered, I think mostly in the mid 1800s, I think that's when they were starting to dig up these fossils. So he was ecstatic. He was ecstatic because there are midrashic teachings that there were different iterations of this world before our present. And also these were these midrashic teachings, and now they're finding evidence of these different worlds, different, very different worlds than we're familiar with that existed beforehand. So there are those that explain this is talking about this iteration. And therefore, in the beginning of God's creating of heaven and earth, at this point, where are we jumping in? The land was empty and astoundingly void and darkness. And then Hashem said, and then this last iteration began. He also says something fascinating, because we have found, so even if you want to say, well, Rabbi, you want to say that the clock started with humankind, right, 5,784 years ago, we have humans going well before then. And he also, well before all of this was found, he understood that Adam and Chava were the first human beings who had this spirituality to them, who had this Ruach Elokim blown in through their nostrils, who had this neshama, this soul, this elevated soul. Okay. Rashi brings, the very first Rashi, I think very pertinent to what's going on in the world today. Rashi says, Rabbi Yitzchak had said, the Torah, well, what is this a book of? Is this a book of law? That it should have started with the first law given to the Jewish people. And what was that? We left Egypt, establishing the Rosh Chodesh. Why is it starting over here? And he explains, the English also has it. Rashi cites, you want to look on the very bottom over here, Rashi cites Rav Yitzchak on the fourth line over here, right? On the very first page, page 2, you have the commentator underneath the line, on the first column, fourth line. Rashi cites Rav Yitzchak, who says that since the Torah is primarily a book of laws, it should have begun with the commandment of the new moon, the first law that was addressed to all of Jewry as a nation. He explains that the reason for the Torah's narrative creation is to establish that God is the sovereign of the universe. He declared to his people the power of his works in order to give them the heritage of the nations. If the nations accuse Israel of banditry for seizing the lands of the 7 nations of Canaan, occupiers, Israel can respond, the entire universe belongs to God. He created it, he granted it to whom he deemed fit. It was his desire to give it to them, then it was his desire to take it from them and to give it to us. Great. Does that answer work? It's not working that well, is it? Let's go to the UN tomorrow and tell them this Rashi, and no more problems, right? But it's not for the nations to know. It's for us to know. It's for us to know. They're not going to be listening. They're not going to care to listen. It's not for them to know. It's for us to know. The Orach Chaim has a very different approach. Breishit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. He created the heavens. He created the earth. He created spirituality, and he created physicality. That's what this world is. This world is a mix of the spiritual and of the physical. Which one is mentioned first? Et hashamayim, the heavenly, the spiritual. What is the primary purpose of this world? The shamayim, the heavenly, the spiritual. Eight hashamayim, the eight haaretz, right? So in Hebrew, what do we do with the word et? Mary, what do we do with the word et? What is that word et? Huzarak hakador, huzarak et hakador. He threw the ball. What do we do with the word et? Right? Aaron, you're a linguist.
D.
Huh?
D.
That's haaretz, is the land. What is the word et? There's a grammatical term. I don't know what it is. Right?
Is it when is it used? It's not used all the time.
No.
It's only used sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's got it has a definite implication.
All the time.
Yeah, but not when you say
No.
But what does the word do? Right? So it connects, it points, yeah. So there's something, so the way the commentators often approach it is it's something, there's a famous Gemara in Kedushin. Shimon HaAmsoni, right? Shimon from Amson. He darshaned, he would expound every time the Torah says et this, et that, he would say it's coming to add on something similar to that. He found every single place where it says et in the Torah, he had a whole thesis, his whole life work, that's what it comes to add on in each time, something that's almost like that. And then he came to the pasuk, et Hashem Elokecha tira. Et Hashem, your God, tira, you should be in awe. And he said, oh, there goes my theory. Because there's nothing that we should be in awe of that is even close to God. And then what did he do? He tore up all of his work. If it's not emet, if it's not truth, I don't want it. Until his student, Rabbi Akiva, came along and said, oh, et Hashem Elokecha tira, what is it that one should be in awe of close to God? Tamidei Chachamim, true Torah sages. So the question is asked, so Rabbi Akiva saw that, why didn't his Rebbe see that? So I think Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal explains, when he saw his Rebbe, Shimon HaAmsoni, who had dedicated years and years and years to explaining what every et meant, and then when he felt there was nothing similar to God, et Hashem, you should fear, and therefore he tore up his life work, because all he wanted to know was what's the truth, what's the emet, what is the Torah teaching us? And if this is not correct, then shred it all. When his students saw that, he was in absolute awe. And he was able to say, oh, et Hashem Elokecha tira, what does it come to add on? A Talmid Chacham, a true Torah sage, who every fiber of his being is there to understand the Torah and to bring God's presence into the world. That's who we should be in awe of, not like Hashem, but et in that secondary. So the Orach Chaim says, et hashamayim, the et haaretz. There's the heavenly and there is the earthly. There's the spiritual, there's the physical. Et hashamayim is, we can take the earthly and make it spiritual, and we can lift it up. The et haaretz. And we could take that which is holy and we could bring it down to the ground. We could debase it. So God created et hashamayim v'et haaretz. He created the heavenly realm and created the physical realm. And et hashamayim, it's up to us. What do we do with that? Where do we go with that? Do we take the physical and bring it up into the heavenly realm, make it godly, or do we take that which is godly and 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 bring it down? You know, we have people doing, as we just saw this past Shmini Atzeret, Simchas Torah. We have people who think that they're acting in God's al Akbar and doing the most disgusting, unhuman behavior imaginable. Et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Okay. Oops. Sorry about that. So that's the choice that we have. There's a lot in this parsha. We did the first pasuk. Let's jump up ahead to the yes.
I'm just wondering when Rabbi Rock gave that shir about the citron,
Yeah.
and he talked about when Hashem created the trees, and he mentioned the word pre, I think, that in one sentence it was mentioned only once, but when he was talking about the tree of knowledge, it was mentioned twice.
Okay, let's take a look at that. Okay. So let's go to just 1 second. Kavamayim Himorot. There we go. Yeah, page 4. Page 4, Perek Aleph, Pasuk Yud Aleph, first chapter. Vayomer Elokim, Tadshe Haaretz, let the land, let the earth sprout. Desha Esev Mazria Zera, right? Herbage yielding seed. Eitz Pri Ose Pri Lemino. Eitz Pri, how the English does this. Fruit trees Ose Pri Lemino, yielding fruits. Okay, the English kind of skirts the issue. Eitz Pri indicates that the eitz itself is part of the pri. The tree, the wood itself, is also the fruit. Ose pri, it's an eitz pri. The wood itself has the flavor of that fruit. Ose pri, and it will also produce fruits. However, Pasuk Yud Bet, verse 12, where it's happening, what does it say? Vatotzei Aretz, and the land gave forth that vegetation. The eitz ose pri. And also it made the eitz trees yielding fruit. It didn't say eitz pri ose pri. It just said trees yielding fruit. Okay? So the trees that we know them, you bite on the bark of the apple tree, you don't taste the apple. Right? That is not what happened. Let's go a little bit further then. Let's jump up ahead. Then I want to come back to Shabbos, but we'll jump up ahead to the point that you brought up.
Rabbi, some trees are
Yes.
intermediate, like trees that give forth maple syrup. You tap them. So some are intermediate in that that's not from the leaves or the fruit. It's from
Yes,
you have to
yes,
tap the bark.
that's true. That's true. Thank you, Jan. There's some trees that give us their sap, right? But it's not that they produce maple syrup bottles and you also taste the bark, right? We're talking about that the bark has the taste of the fruit. Whereas the maple trees, I don't think they produce any fruit at all. I think that's just the sap that we pull out over there.
And he also mentioned the leaves tasted like citron also.
Let's go to page 12. Perek Bet, chapter 2, verse Tet Zayin, verse 16. Well, let's go 15. And God took Adam and placed him, Began Eden, in the Garden of Eden, La'avda u'Lashamra, that's a whole other discussion, to work it and to guard it. Vayitzav Hashem Elokim Adam le'mor, Mikol Eitz Hagan achol tochel. Right? People often make the mistake. What was the first commandment given? People mistakenly say, what was the first commandment given? Not to eat from the Eitz Hadat, not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Not true. What was the first commandment given? Verse 16. Hashem commanded Adam saying, Mikol Eitz Hagan achol tochel. From all the trees of the garden, achol tochel. Eat, you shall eat. It reminds me of my grandmother. Essen, mein Kind. Essen. Eat, my child. Eat, eat, eat. What does Hashem want? Enjoy. Enjoy the world. The Gemara points out that a Nazir, a Nazirite who took on this oath of this higher level, a Nazirite, he can't drink wine and he grows his hair. At the end of his stint of Nazirite, he needs to bring sacrifices. One of them is a chatat. A chatat is a sin offering. Why a sin offering? So different explanations are given. One explanation is God gave us this beautiful world. You're meant to enjoy this world. Right? And the Gemara goes on to say, and if a person takes on an unnecessary fast, that's even worse. Right? God gave us this beautiful world. Enjoy this world. Right? I compare it, you give someone a gift. It's a beautiful box, all wrapped up. You give them a gift. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You come back 3 weeks later, you visit them again, and you see the gift is all wrapped up still, sitting in their garage. It hasn't been opened up. You feel terrible. I gave them this gift. They didn't bother opening it. Right? Why aren't they using this gift? I gave thought and really worked out what they could really use, what could they better, and they're not even opening it up. Right? So Hashem wants us to enjoy within the parameters that He gives us. He wants us to enjoy this world. We call Eitz Hagan achol tochel. From all the trees of the garden you should eat. Ume'etz hadat tov v'ra lo tochal mimenu. But from the Eitz Hadat, from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, lo tochal mimenu, that you should not eat from. Ki v'yom ha'chacham mimenu mot tamut. On the day that you eat from that, you will gain this mortality. Not that you will die as soon as you eat it, right? But then your end will be mot tamut. You will have this mortality. What was this tree? So there are 4 main opinions as to what was this tree. An apple is not one of the 4. It was not an apple. Okay? What was this tree? Some say it was wheat, because once a person consumes wheat, that's when the person gets that da'at, gets that knowledge, gets that development of their cognitive abilities. Others say it was Okay, we'll come to etrog soon, right? Others say that it was grapes, right? It was a grapevine because we know that wine can lead to some poor choices along the way, a lack of discretion. Others say, Rashi brings it over here a little bit later on, when they realized they were naked, what do? They took a leaf from the fig tree. It was only the fig tree. Since it was a fig tree, that's what allowed them to take the leaf from there. And others say that it was an etrog tree. Now, let's take this a little bit further when we come to the sin of eating. Let's take a look on page 14. Again, this is the Or HaChaim's approach. Vatera ha'isha, the woman saw, ki tov ha'etz lema'achal, that the eitz was good for eating. V'chitava hu le'einayim, it was desirous to the eyes. V'nechmar ha'etz lahaskil, and this was a means of wisdom. Vatikach mi piryo vatochal, she took from the fruit and she ate. So Or HaChaim explains in defense of Chava that, well, we'll see in a moment. First, he asks, before you taste something, you see it. So the order here seems a little bit strange. She saw that it was good for eating and that it looked nice. What should the order have been? She saw that it was of a pleasing appearance, and then what did she do? And then she got closer and said, "Oh, it must taste good." And the Nachash had said to her, the Or HaChaim explains the Nachash was not talking, but the same way that we say that Shlomo HaMelech was able to understand the language of animals, the Nachash, she was able to understand the message that this Nachash was giving to her, that she become like God-like. See, he explains as follows. Look carefully. She saw that the eitz was good for ma'achal, and then she took from the fruits and she ate. So what happened was she first took some of the wood. He understands. That's what it says. Tov ha'etz lema'achal. Wow. This is a unique tree. This is unique in that the taste of the wood itself has a fruit-like taste. The other trees of the garden, they have fruit. But this was the one that actually the wood tasted like the fruit. The very rock spoke on Sukkot, how we had taken IHDS, the middle school, up to a trip, up 4 hours up north, where there is the one North American etrog orchard, right? Most of it comes from Israel, comes from Morocco, but here there's an orchard, and they bit on the leaves and on the bark, and there was the taste of the etrog on the bark and on the leaves. Fascinating. So she tasted the wood and said, wow, this is something so unique. And therefore she really wanted to have this. And she realized maybe this really will give us this knowledge. Vatikach mi piryo. And then what did she take from? Then she took the fruit, vatochal, and she ate. And it goes on to say, Pasuk Zayin, page 16, she gave also to Adam along with her, vayochal, and he ate. And he says that it could be Adam did not know, right? His wife, his wife prepared dinner, right? He didn't start asking, well, what are all the ingredients, right? So he, right? He says that he perhaps didn't even realize that this was from the Eitz Hadat, and she, not like the way Rashi says, was that she said, well, if I'm dying, he's got to die with me, but rather he has a much more generous. Her eyes opened up. This was amazing. This was amazing. And therefore she wanted him to also share in that experience along with her. So that's the Orach Chaim also goes into that idea that the Eitz Hadat was the one tree which actually had the Eitz and the Pri all doing the same. So I wanted to go into a Shabbos thing, but we'll have to go into that when we get to the later on Parshiot. So let's continue with this. What then happens? On page 16, verse 7, their eyes opened up, and they knew that they were naked, and they took a leaf of the te'ena, of the fig leaf. That's what we said before. That's the opinion that says it was a fig tree. No other tree was giving them their leaves. And they made for themselves these aprons to cover themselves up.
So did they have a needle and a thread?
I'm sure they had some sort of vines, right? Yeah, right, thread. Yeah. They sewed together, right? They probably took some sort of vines, right? How's the leaf going to stay on? Right? They had to do some sort of a sewing idea. So I heard a very, very fascinating idea on this. They recognize. Well, Rashi says they knew that they were naked. Of course, everyone knows if they're naked or not. So Rashi learns it in a more spiritual sense. They had this one mitzvah, and now they became naked from that mitzvah. They had shed the aura of that mitzvah by having breached this. This Eitz Hadat Tovara, what's wrong with knowledge? So clearly they had knowledge beforehand. They had to have knowledge beforehand. If they had no knowledge, then you can't give them a command, don't do this. You can't, a little toddler, right? Well, don't do that. What do they know? They had knowledge, but the issue was Tov and Ra, right? And Eitz Hada'at. Da'at means knowledge. Da'at also means a connection, an intimate connection. When it talks about intimate marital relations, how does the Torah describe it? Vayeda, and he knew his wife, right? There is a certain intimate connection that comes about. This was an ingestion of Tov and Ra. And the way that many of the commentators approach this is until this point, they were Kulo Tov, they were fully good, and there could be this outside temptation, but it would be from the outside. Once they ate from the Eitz Hadat Tov Ra, then they ingested, so to speak, this Tov and Ra, and it became an internal struggle that we each have. And that's what we have. We have an internal struggle, right? Should I do it? Should I not do it? Right? What's the right? Right? Even when there are different moral dilemmas, and Rabbi David Foreman goes into this in beautiful detail. There are different moral dilemmas, right? There's a moral dilemma. Should I be honest when I'm filling out my tax returns? That's a moral dilemma. There's also the moral dilemma. I'm hiding with my infant, and the infant's about to start to cry, and that's going to get us all killed. So do I smother the infant in order to keep us all alive or not? Right? Do I divert this plane and it will only kill one person as opposed to killing 100? But do I those are very different moral dilemmas, right? One moral dilemma is, what's the right thing to do? The first dilemma is, do I do the right thing or not? So once we had, it used to be that there would be decisions that need to be made, decisions of what's the right decision to make. But in internal debate, do I do what's right or not? That didn't exist. And now, from eating this, we became this, what's the term? This tortured individual who tries to do what's right, but often falls short. That was what came about. It wasn't they didn't have this das, knowledge, but this tortured existence of, should I do what I know is right or should I not do what I know is right? That only came about afterwards. And now they realized that they were naked. So the way this was once explained, I forget the name of the rabbi who explained it. I was at Esha Torah one time in Israel. He explained it so beautifully, probably in the name of Rav Noach Weinberg, right? We've gone horseback riding. We've gone horseback riding. What was the horse wearing? A saddle. Was that kind of embarrassing? It's kind of raunchy, just wearing a saddle, right? No, we're not the least bit embarrassed. Why? Because I'm riding on a horse. A horse is a horse. Of course. Remember that one? Right? Mr. Ed? Right? It's a horse. Who cares? A horse is not a reflection on me. So initially they were in Gan Eden. What were they? They were this Shamayim Va'aretz. They were Shamayim. They were this heavenly being which needed a means of transportation. So they were in a physical body. The body was their horse. There was their means of transportation. The fact that they were naked, so what? But once they ate from this Eitz Hadas and there was this confusion over Tov and Ra, there was this confusion over the Shamayim and the Aretz. There was confusion of, what am I? Am I a soul that has a body with which I maneuver in this world? Or am I a body that has this soul of God in me? Once there was this identity crisis, then all of a sudden, the emperor's not wearing any clothes. All of a sudden, this is me. This is not the horse that is naked. All of a sudden, this is me. Once there was that confusion of we began with the Shamayim and the Aretz, the spiritual, the physical. Who am I? What am I? Like Yitzbo Shashu. Then they become embarrassed because of that.
Also,
What
Rabbi,
results? Yes, Janet?
the middle of your explanation made me flash on that their nakedness was an exposure and allowed them, the Yetzer Hara, to get more enmeshed and embedded.
Yes. Well, because of the eating the Eitz Hadas, all of a sudden sexuality became something that was, we view it as pure. We view it as kadosh. Marriage we call kiddushin, right? At the same time, it's something that can become very debased, and therefore it needs to be done in a private, modest manner, right? But before that, it was like any other bodily function. We're not embarrassed when we're eating, right? It was, but yes, this mixture, this confusion is what led them to that. Let's just do one more. I'll do the Shabbos another point. Then what happens? Take a look on page 18. Vayomer Hashem Elokim, verse 22 on page 18. Parak Gimel Pasuk Chaf Bet. Vata, Hashem, whole man has become unique like amongst us. Lada Tovara, Viata, and now Pen Yishlach Yado, lest he'll send forth his hand. V'lakach Game Eitz HaChayim, and he'll eat from the tree of life, and he'll take from the tree of life. V'achal, and he'll eat. V'chai la'olam, and he'll live forever. Vayishalchei Hashem Elokim migan Eden. Therefore, what did God do? He sent him out from Gan Eden, la'avod et adamah, to work the earth, asher lukach mesham, that he was taken from, and he was sent out of Gan Eden, lest from the Garden of Eden, lest he eat from the Eitz HaChayim. So the way the Or HaChaim explains this, and also the Nefesh HaChaim explains this, but the Or HaChaim is one of the classic commentators here in the Chumash itself. Once we ate from the Eitz Hadat and we became this mixture of Tov and Ra. Well, let's go back to another question. God said he could eat from all the trees of the garden. Is that true or not true? So you can say, well, it came with the caveat, but from this one you can't eat. But the first pasuk says you can eat from all the trees of the garden. And that's not really true. Well, it is true. Had he held out, it would all happen. This was a very eventful Friday. You think our Fridays are busy. This was a very eventful Friday. Had he held out, he would have, according to those who say that it was Geffen, he would have made Kiddush that night for the grapes from the Eitz Hadat. That was given to him to eat, but not at that moment. So we have Adam and Chava in Gan Eden. Now, when we talk about the afterlife, we refer to that as Gan Eden. But both are true, meaning Gan Eden is the place where one could have that complete connection with God. Adam and Chava were created in a way that they could have reached that point, and Gan Eden could have been here on earth. And they would have had from the Eitz Hadat and had that deveikut, that clinging, that oneness, that unity with God. Once they ate from the Eitz Hadat, humankind was changed. This is not the Christian original sin and we're forever cursed and only by whatever nonsense follows. But humankind was changed. They were changed also. And in that changed state, they could never have that unity with God, which was the purpose of creation. Shamayim first, and then Aretz. And therefore, for them to have eaten from the Eitz HaChayim, that would have been the most horrendous thing for them that could have happened. Because that would have meant that they would eternally be separated, bereft of this connection with God. And therefore, mortality was not a punishment. Mortality is the step that is needed in order for a person to ultimately connect to God. And that is what we speak about when we talk about Olam Haba, the world to come. We're actually referring to the Olam HaNeshamot, the world of the souls, which is an interim stage. And as the second blessing of our Amidah speaks about, the ultimate time will be where there will be a resuscitation, a resurrection of body and soul together and have that connection to God. So being banished from the Garden of Eden, lest he eat from the Eitz HaChayim, was not a punishment. It was to ensure that they would not forever be locked into this imperfected, non-ability to draw close to God state. And that is really the essence of what life and creation and humankind is about, according to Judaism. There is Shamayim, the heavenly, the spiritual. There is the Aretz, there is the physical. There's Eita Shamayim. There's the ability to bring the physical up into the spiritual. And along with that, there always has to be the same possibility of taking the spiritual and dragging it down. And the time that we have here is a time, and their mortality is something that we need in order to then be able to continue our sojourn. But the Mishnah says in Avot, Da ma lamala mimcha, which means simply know that which is above you, meaning a person should live with understanding that there is the next stage. But the Nefesh HaChaim says, Da ma lamala, know that whatever is there above in the spiritual world, mimcha, it's from you. You create it. You've got to build that. And that's our mission over here, 8 Hashamayim, to do whatever we can to, and that's what every mitzvah is. Every mitzvah is the way to touch eternity, to touch godliness as we are here in our physical shell world. Yes, Shell.
Does the power of good do something to make the power of evil stronger?
Stronger?
Right. So here we are davening and trying to do our best to elevate ourselves in the world. So does that make the evil forces even stronger to combat that good that we're trying to protect?
So that's a very interesting question, because I reacted stronger, right? I jumped, right? Because but I want to give credence to what you're saying in a moment. But our general understanding is that, I mentioned this last night when we were saying the Tehillim, that we have the ability to increase the good in the world. The more good in the world, the closer Hashem's presence is, the more, right? And therefore, the more bracha, blessing comes to the world. Bad in the world, Hashem's presence moves further away, and that's what allows, terrible things to happen. So on one level, that's what happens. But you are raising a very interesting point, and that is there's always zeh l'umat zeh. There's always the balance, right? As a person becomes better, if the Yetzer Hara would stay, if their inclination to do bad would stay at the lower level, then it's no longer a challenge. It's no longer an opportunity for growth and development. Right? So therefore, the Yetzer Hara, as we call it, the inclination to do bad, that will also go up. But I think there's a difference between Ra and Yetzer Ra. Meaning, when we do good, the world becomes a better place. There is more Tov in the world, there's less Ra, evil in the world. Nevertheless, we as individuals, we might have, as we become greater, we might have greater temptations in order to still have that struggle of humanity, the free choice of humanity, right? We, at the very end of the Torah, we had the time where the Torah speaks about the Messianic times, where Umal Hashem es levavcha, Hashem will circumcise the heart and will just want to do good. But until that point, we as individuals struggle. So I think there's a difference between the Ra in the world and the Yetzer Hara, and the struggles that an individual might be having. But certainly we view that the more good we do, Hashem's presence comes closer. As we say, Kiva or Panecha, with the light of your countenance, Nasatalanu, Torah, Avas Chesed, etc., etc. Yes.
I know, like you
many interpretations in verse 1. But, and so I've heard this, I'm sure you probably have too, is that the Aleph Tav, that, the whole Aleph base.
Nice. Yeah.
So saying that God first created Aleph to Tav, created the alphabet, and from that he fashioned the universe.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is, as physicists are studying at subatomic level, so there's the string theory, and then so these, and it almost makes you think, well, of course, that's the string of the the lamed and the the
Interesting.
That's
Interesting.
the raw materials.
The raw material.
Just to give you a sense, right? This is called Mikros Gedolos. It has lots of the classic commentaries. This is the first pasuk. These are the commentators.
Is that all Hebrew? I guess there's no translations.
Second verse.
Wow.
That's why I needed to start 3 weeks in advance to try to do one of the commentators, the Orach Chaim, right? That was not just Orach Chaim. That was Orach Chaim, Kli Yakar, Ramban, amongst others. But those are the three main big ones. Yeah. So yeah. But we started. That's what we can do, right? And that's the beauty of the Torah. We restart every year and try to add on a few more layers.
I'm also
Yeah.
kind of thinking about Esau and Jacob.
Oh, we'll get there. We have a little time.
No. But in this context of good and evil, and like who's gonna rule who?
Yeah. That's we'll get to Yaakov and Esau. That's a complicated one. I like the way Rabbi Sachs approaches that. We will get there. Okay. Good seeing everybody online. Janet, Elizabeth, Linda.
Thank you,
and
Rabbi.
Rosa. Okay, everybody can say goodbye to those who are here online.
Bye.
Okay, good. So with the holidays behind us, right? So the last of the holidays was Simchas Torah. So that was letting us know that the way to go through the long winter until Pesach is with the Simcha and Torah. So we'll be on schedule now, please God, for many weeks. We had a lot of a jumpy schedule with the holidays, but now we're ready to rock and roll. Okay. Yes.
Into winter, aren't there certain psalms that you're supposed to be reciting? Because I know we did Psalm 27 continually.
So no. Or it's Psalm 27 we did continuously from beginning of Elul through Shmini Atzeret. Now we don't have. There's a psalm of the day that we say every day, right? The Shir Shel Yom, but there are not particular psalms, right? With all that's going on in Israel, I do. Actually, I'm going to try to send out in my newsletter. I have to see if I could. There's a wonderful app that you just hit, and it will give you one psalm with a name of an Israeli soldier. And you can say that psalm with that soldier's name in mind, right? Each time, and that way. And if I hit over here, so I'll get one soldier's name for Psalm 30. If you do next, then you'll get Psalm 31. So that way we constantly are going through the Sefer of Tehillim with the names of the soldiers in mind.
We use that app for my great niece.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Yeah.
I just followed a link, but they
So,
give you a song
sometimes people will set it up, right? If a family or group is davening for someone, so that way you want to make sure that that all the chapters are being, and that way it keeps everybody on track. It's a wonderful thing that was set up.
Thank you for the time with the Tehillim last night.
That
felt
was
like they
amazing.
actually accomplished something on behalf of what's going on in Israel. It's really good.
Yeah. Is there any latest news that you could share with us about what's happening?
I don't know. I think we are we are certainly moving forward in terms of getting rid of all the terrorists who infiltrated, right? What I have heard is that the towns around Gaza have been reclaimed, but there have been some terrible atrocities that are being discovered within those towns. The border has been properly sealed again now, and Israel is preparing for a big operation too. I think it became very clear that Hamas is not someone that we can live with, right? As we thought we could, that they duped us into thinking that they were putting the benefit of their people and having a regular life ahead of their hope to slaughter Jews. Because what I can't wrap my head around is, what do they think they're accomplishing? Like, what goal are they trying to get towards? Right?
There's probably a bigger picture that we don't see.
They want to be martyrs. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm if they want to be martyrs, I'm all in favor of expediting.
Yeah. They want to get rid of all the Jews.
I know, but do they think that?
Israel.
Yes.
But it's just such a little tiny strip of land. It's like, why would you? It doesn't make sense.
Do they think that that's going to happen? Do they think that this is going to make it happen? Right?
Well,
Yeah, I don't know.
there was the same goal in the 48. In 1948.
In 1948, it was a realistic goal.
It was a realistic goal, but maybe
You had all these Arab armies, and you had this nation that was just getting started, right? Right? There it was a realistic goal, right? But I don't know.
it will never give up.
Yeah.
There's such a hatred that there always has to be an enemy. So after the Jews, it would be the Christians.
Yeah. Well, that
Hindus.
that they actually stated explicitly. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Hashem should have compassion and help us along. We need to make our efforts, but ultimately that's where it comes from.
Thank you.
Great having everybody here today.
Thank you.
Nice meeting all of you. Have a
Wonderful
day.
Be well.